Welcome, Big Ten fans. This is Big Ten Ted Live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another edition, another Wednesday night of Big Ten Ted Live. It is April 19th, 2023. We've got some stuff to topic. Usually a 3-topic show. That's what it's been the last few weeks. I got a 2-topic show. So if you guys want to fill in with topic 3, topic 4, topic 5, there's going to be plenty of opportunities to talk what you want to talk about here tonight. I'll get to my topics of what I want to talk about here tonight. Before we get to that, just a reminder, if you are new to the channel, subscribing is a way to stay up to date of all the stuff we're doing. Dropping stuff every single day. Could be an uploaded video. Every Wednesday is a live stream. Do YouTube shorts usually on the weekends, and on Mondays, community polls. There's all sorts of Big Ten content. If you're a Big Ten fan, this right here, you've made it to the right place. This right here is the place to be. Also on Twitter, at Big Ten Ted, on the old bird, on the old bluebird over there on Twitter. If you want to get involved in the show tonight, as I said before, a super chat, and the phone lines will be open, 715-600-2150, 715-600-2150. How I'm going to do this tonight, we've got a topic. I'm going to do my little spiel on that. We're going to have an open conversation, going to do another topic, going to have another open conversation. So it's going to kind of alternate like that as well. So like I said in the open, if you have certain things that you want to talk about that's on your mind, chat and the phone lines are a great place to do that as well here tonight. So let's talk about what I'm talking about here tonight. USC and UCLA, new members of the Big Ten Conference as of 2024. But right now, is the West Coast Big Ten country? And if it's not, should it be? Does the Big Ten want that? And when could it happen? So we'll talk about all things West Coast and Big Ten and how they tie together. So we're going to talk about that. There's some stuff in there that the more I kind of dove into that topic, the more layers of the onion there was to kind of peel back one layer at a time. And I might talk some more stuff about that, especially as expansion goes. I might talk more about that next week. So there's a little teaser for you. So I'm going to talk about that as well. Going to talk about the spring games. If you're a Big Ten West fan, this is your week. Every single Big Ten West team will be playing their spring game this week. We've got the Illinois spring game tomorrow night. I might talk about that later in the show, but I'll definitely be talking about the spring games on Saturday. Your Iowa, your Wisconsin, your Nebraska, your Minnesota, your Northwestern. Might throw in a little bit of Purdue there at the end as well, even though they're not playing at Ross-Ade Stadium due to the construction over there. But there's a lot to go over. So talking Big Ten West and the spring football games that they have coming down the pike here coming up this weekend. So thanks for tuning in to Big Ten Ted Live here tonight. So let's get into our first topic here on the program. It's all about the West Coast. Ever since the Big Ten announced that USC and UCLA were joining the conference in 2024, that's where a lot of the focus has gone to the West Coast. What is the future of the West Coast? Does it start and end with USC and UCLA? Or is there more expansion on the way in the West Coast? Where is the value? I've been talking about value a lot here on this channel as of late. So let's start with this. Let's start with on the field. Let's start with recruiting. When you talk about high school football recruiting, when you talk about bringing in good players into a program, it starts with recruiting, and it doesn't get any better recruiting-wise than SoCal. It doesn't get any better than the Los Angeles area. Okay, because when you talk about recruiting, I did some research, believe it or not, leading into today's show. And when you talk about recruiting, the most 5-star prospects have come out of the Los Angeles area. It's a who's who of guys that have come out of LA and greater LA in the surrounding area. So what does that mean for the future of the Big Ten Conference? It means it's kind of two-sided. First, you got to start with the Trojans and the Bruins, because right now they're in the Pac-12, of course. And the Big Ten is a lot more highly viewed than the Pac-12, at least as of right now. Even though the Pac-12, I think, is going to be pretty good in 2023, a lot of good quarterbacks in the Pac-12 this upcoming season. But when you talk about the players wanting to play in the Pac-12, I just don't know if the desire is there. Now USC and UCLA, instead of playing Oregon State, Washington State, Colorado, Arizona, they're going to be playing Nebraska. They're going to be playing Wisconsin. They're going to be playing Michigan. They're going to be playing Michigan State. They're going to be playing Penn State. The list goes on and on and on. Having that LA recruiting base and combining it with the exposure of the Big Ten, especially with the new TV deal with Fox, with CBS, with NBC, factoring all of that in together, that's a big win. I believe even though the Trojans and the Bruins have that market, that recruiting market at their controls, now with the Big Ten, they're going to be able to recruit, hey, we're going to play Ohio State. We're going to play at the Shoe. Then we're going to host Penn State. We're going to kind of go back and forth like that. Now you look at it from the Big Ten's point of view, and all of a sudden, you have at your disposal a pipeline to one of the very best recruiting areas, if not the best recruiting area in the United States of America. Okay? That is going to up the level of play on the field in the Big Ten a lot. How high? What does a lot actually mean? I think that is yet to be determined. I think we're yet to find out what exactly that means. How high? How is Wisconsin's, the Nebraskas, the Michigans, how much are these schools going to be able to go into California? How much talent are they able to pull out of there? There's going to be some. It's just a matter of how much. So when it comes to the West Coast being Big Ten country, when it comes to on the field, when it comes to recruiting, they've taken the gem. They've taken the top thing in terms of recruiting and producing high school talent that the West Coast has to offer. They've taken Los Angeles. And that is huge. Now, there are some good players that come out of Washington, you come other parts of California and all these other places. But when you go up and down the left coast, it is all about Los Angeles. It's all about greater LA. It's all about Southern California. When Pete Carroll was the head coach at USC, he lived in a 100-mile radius, 60 to 100-mile radius of Los Angeles, California. And it went pretty well for him. Let's just say that. So in terms of recruiting, what the West Coast has to offer and the best parts that the West Coast has to offer, I'd say that's Big Ten country. And they might not reap the rewards right away. It might take some time, but eventually you got to think they're going to get there. Now let's dive into the meat and potatoes of all this stuff. Let's dive into the off-the-field stuff. Let's dive into the markets, the financials, the television, and maybe, just maybe, the expansion. All right, let's kind of lay it out a little bit in terms of markets. Let's start with TV markets. LA is big, man, and it is the crown jewel of television markets west of the Mississippi. Hollywood, the size of the area, it's all there. The Bay Area, San Francisco, San Jose, Oakland, that's the number 10 media market. Then you go to Seattle, that's number 12. You even go to Portland, and that's a solid number 22. Let's talk about population now. Los Angeles is the number 2 market in America in terms of population. 13 million people in the greater LA area. The Bay Area is number 13 in population. Seattle's number 15 in population. Portland is number 25. Let me put something into perspective. Seattle, Portland, and the Bay Area together is 10 million people, give or take. So if you're, and I know you guys know where I'm going with this. You know I'm headed down the expansion track. You know that's where things are headed. So when you talk about your Washingtons, your Oregons, your Stanford and Cals, and you talk about the sheer amount of people, and you talk about the West Coast becoming Big Ten country, and what's it going to take, the thing you got to talk about, one thing, this is just one of many. One thing out of many that we talk about is the populations, the media markets. That's a big thing. And Seattle and the Bay Area, those are two pretty solid media markets. You could almost double the amount that you brought in LA on the West Coast by bringing in those 3 media markets, 4 schools in 3 media markets. So what does this mean? The Big Ten still has money left out on the table on the West Coast. The Big Ten can go to the West Coast and they can make it their own anytime. They can do it tomorrow. They can do it next week. They can do it 2 months from now. They can do it 3 months from now. Tony Petitti holds the West Coast in his hand if he wants it. If he wants it, if he wants to merge it with the rest of the Big Ten, he can do that. It's just a matter of when, possibly, the West Coast becomes Big Ten country. I want to talk about a scenario. Okay, because we're asking the question here to start off the show. Is the West Coast Big Ten country? Okay? If the Pac-12 stays together, maybe the rumors are San Diego State and SMU bring in, they get their deal, they make $30 million a year per school or whatever. If the Pac-12 stays together, the Pac-12 still has Seattle, they still have the Bay Area, they still have Portland, they probably bring in San Diego. The West Coast would still have a Pac-12 presence. So if the Pac-12 stays together, a lot of those markets and a lot of the population and a lot of the potential for the Big Ten down the road is still in Pac-12 country, so to speak. So in terms of recruiting, in terms of on the field, I think soon you're going to see the Big Ten, you're going to see the West Coast be Big Ten country, and you're going to see a lot of Big Ten teams come in and take over. And you're going to see a lot of Big Ten recruiting really surge because of the additions of USC and UCLA, because of having California at their disposal. Off the field, still think there's stuff left on the table. Still think there's money left to be earned on the table. Now, where's the money? You talk about all this money, where's it coming from? Okay, wait, Ted, you've said Washington and Oregon maybe necessarily don't bring the value. This is an ever-evolving thing from week to week here on Big Ten Ted Live. I want to share some points that I found in a Forbes article that was released not too long ago, because I think there are some very interesting points in here. Things to kind of keep it in your brain. Let's start first here. Stanford is the home of Apple's multi-million-dollar virtual reality research and development lab, along with the medical school has an arrangement with the company to test the Apple Watch heart monitoring system. A study done by Universium in November 22 proved how involved Cal and Stanford are in the tech industry. Cal and Stanford and Apple. Apple is one of those streamers out there. Apple is one of those streamers out there that's involved with the Pac-12. There was rumblings before the NBC, CBS, and Fox that maybe they could be involved as well. And they're right there in the Bay Area in Cupertino, California. When you talk about Stanford and Cal, there's a ton of alumni in that area, in Silicon Valley, where there's a lot of money in a lot of big tech companies, and there's a lot of alumni in that area. Okay? We talk about alumni. Let's go on to the next point. Stanford has the highest number of alumni, 16,326, who have been employed at top tech companies such as Apple and Amazon and Google, with the University of Cal Berkeley just second, 16,124. So you have about 32,000 alumni. 32,000 alumni in that area that either went to Stanford, that either went to Cal, that have partnerships that are working for Apple and that are working for Amazon. Now, I'm not saying just because tens of thousands of people, graduates from these two schools, work for these companies means that they're going to sign a media deal. No, that's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is the seeds have been planted. The relationship is there, and I'm going to continue to go on. And there is the alumni. That is a big thing when you talk about LA. Other Big Ten alumni in Los Angeles and the large alumni base from those schools. A lot of fans in that area. Okay, let's talk about Seattle. Up the coast in Seattle, the University of Washington and Amazon, because that's where Amazon is headquartered, remember, have joined together to create a science hub, an effort that deepens the relationship between the two organizations and will advance innovation in core robotics, artificial intelligence technologies, and their applications. You keep on going down the list. Microsoft and Amazon in Seattle, big tech companies. Alumni from possibly other Big Ten universities working in places like Seattle, working in places like the Bay Area. In total, there are presently around 17,000 graduates who have found a job at either Amazon or Microsoft, not to mention the other smaller startup companies. What I'm trying to say is the alumni, the money is there. The wealthier alumni is there to make the West Coast Big Ten territory, because I believe Apple TV Plus and Amazon Prime is going to be a key to see the West Coast expand as we continue to go on. And of course, you can win in the classroom, but on the field. Stanford has won 131 NCAA team national titles, the most of any Division I school. Okay, so the points I'm trying to make here, there's still money left on the table. There are still advantages to go into Seattle, to go into Portland, to go into the Bay Area, to expand. And what would be the benefits? The benefits would be a possible relationship with Apple TV Plus. The benefits would be a possible relationship with Amazon Prime. 2 top 15 media markets. 3 top 25 media markets. Competitive teams like Washington and Oregon on the football field. Olympic sports at Stanford and Cal are pretty good, but you want to see the investment on the football field. I think that's where things can maybe teeter in a certain direction. So as it stands right now, I think recruiting is going to take a big step up in California, but I still think there's a ways to go, especially as long as the Pac-12 is there on the West Coast. They're still going to be there, and they still can come into Southern California and take some of those recruits, possibly. You've seen Oregon kind of do that over the years. So I still think we got a ways to go before the West Coast becomes Big Ten country until we get to that point, but who knows? Maybe it will be at some point. Should be interesting to see. I think the more I kind of go down the line, you got to keep an eye on the ACC. In about 10 to 15 years, it could be up for grabs. There's a lot of scenarios here. Going to get here on some comments. Some guys checking in. Here we got the Buckshot Kid coming in. What's going on here? Friend of the channel. Over there, we've got Big Ten Johnny checking in as well here tonight. We've got Lewis Papp on the show. Appreciate you coming by here for tonight. Sunshine Design saying Stanford, the Cardinal, will be next. Stanford is one of those teams that at first you're like, Stanford, well, they're not that good on the football field, and maybe their games aren't that well attended. You dive into it a little bit, you kind of keep on going down the line, and then you're like, well, Stanford has the Bay Area. Stanford is great academically. I just mentioned their ties with Apple. There's maybe things to be had there with Stanford. There's maybe something to keep an eye on over there with the Stanford Cardinal. Yeah, Stanford in the Bay Area. That's one to keep an eye on, folks. Cal, I don't know. I don't know about Cal. Do you need 2 teams in the Bay Area? Maybe not. Others have thrown out the scenario of Oregon and Washington first, and then maybe Notre Dame and Stanford second. That's been a possibility as well. Next week, I might go over the financials to make this happen, because I think there is room. I think there is money where this could happen. But networks got to spend money on the Big Ten, and they got to say see you later to the Pac-12. I'll just say that. John checking in. Badger football. We are going to be talking about some Badger football in our next segment. They've got their spring game, or should I say the launch, this Saturday at Camp Randall Stadium. So we will get into that here as the show chugs along. Wisconsin got a video coming out tomorrow, or is it Friday? I think it's tomorrow. Yeah, we got a video coming out tomorrow about Wisconsin. There's been some other content out there on the interwebs saying Wisconsin, are they overrated? Are they overhyped? I'm going to dive into that. I'm going to give my take tomorrow here on the channel. Because there is a lot of hype about Wisconsin. And there's a lot of interest about Wisconsin nationwide. Where will the Badgers fit in? I believe their schedule works in their favor. I'll give you a little tease, John, there. And our buddy Stephen Lang checking in here tonight. Stanford Stadium was filled with the opposing teams who live in the Bay Area. And that's a big thing why everybody a lot of teams poke fun at UCLA in the Rose Bowl and their lack of fans. And yeah, you see Nebraska, when Nebraska, that's just the first one, you could insert Michigan, you can insert Ohio State. I'm just going to use Nebraska because they're known for traveling and their fans travel very well. You see Nebraska travel to the Rose Bowl, you might get 60,000 Husker fans in there because it fills 90,000? You might get all of those Husker fans filled into the Rose Bowl. The same thing for Stanford. A lot of Big Ten alumni. That's a big thing for all these alumni in this area, because if you're adding it USC is a big brand, but UCLA, let's talk about the ones out east, about Rutgers. You're not adding Rutgers because maybe it's the most popular thing in New York City. You're adding it because New York City is alumni. There's people working in New York City that went to Michigan, that went to Ohio State, that went to Wisconsin. Insert Big Ten school here. Where there's a lot of Big Ten alumni, there will be a lot of interest in that area. So does the Bay Area have a lot of Big Ten alumni? I would think there's a lot of good schools. A lot of, as we mentioned, Silicon Valley. You got the Silicon Forest up there in Seattle. You'd think there'd be a lot of alumni from a lot of these other schools, along with the Washingtons, the Stanfords, and the Cals of the world. But you just got to find the money, of course. That's where it all comes down to it. It would. Stanford, I think their stadium is only 40 or 50,000. And maybe it's kind of hard to tell. Would the interest still be there? Is the interest just lacking right now because maybe these teams aren't that good? Or is it what I'm trying to say, if you bring in Michigan State, you bring in all these different teams, would the interest then go up whether the team is good or bad? In Palo Alto, in Berkeley, in Seattle, in Eugene? Where does this go for the Big Ten? I think those are things that Tony Petitti and his minions kind of have to, and the university presidents kind of have to go over. They got to go over that. More from Sunshine Design. Those four teams, Washington, Oregon, Stanford, and Notre Dame, would ice the Big Ten cake. It seems like that could be the combination. Two teams in one market, USC and UCLA. It was like that in Los Angeles. It was like that in LA. But LA is huge. Not saying the Bay Area isn't huge. It's not as big as LA, though. It's not as big as LA. So, but the thing is, you add Notre Dame, and now you got to wait because the ACC has a deal where if Notre Dame joins the conference, got to be the ACC that granted rights till 2036. All of these things that continue, all of these little roadblocks in conference realignment. Don't you wish we could all get together? Don't you wish all these conference commissioners could sit in a room and all these university presidents could sit in a room, athletic directors, and say, I want to go here. Well, I want to go here. Well, and negotiate it out, and boom, you're done, and we can just get this business over with, and then networks negotiate and all this stuff. But that's not how the world works, folks. I'd make it much less interesting. It'd be very interesting, during that little college football summit. But after that, what would we talk? What would we even talk about in the off season? It's what keeps us busy. I've learned more about Washington football and Oregon football and the city of Seattle and Eugene and media markets than I would maybe ever care to know about. But these are things. These are things that are popular within the Big Ten circles. These are things that people are talking about in the Big Ten circles. And these are things that people will continue to talk about in the Big Ten circles. Tony Petitti has to ask himself, what's the value? I mentioned last week. University presidents are going to have to decide at some point. They're going to have to decide between money and academics. I think there's a balance that can be achieved financially and academically. I think it can happen in the Southeast. I think it can happen out West. I think it can happen in a variety of places. And I think that's one thing that you get that up and down the West Coast. You get a lot of like Washington. The more I research, Washington is right up there with the Stanfords and the Cals in terms of research. Like they're right up there academically. Oregon maybe brings more athletically. And then Stanford. So I think when all is said and done, okay, well, we just talked about the West Coast becoming a Big Ten country. I think when all is said and done, you're going to get up into the Northwest. You're going to get somewhere in the Bay Area. It's just a matter of when. It's just a matter of how we get there, in my opinion. So that's kind of how I feel about those certain topics. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to Big Ten Ted Live tonight. Chat, super chat, phone calls. That's how you can interact with the show here this evening. Thanks for tuning in to Big Ten Ted Live. We're going to get to some spring games because if you're a Big Ten West fan, this weekend is your weekend. This weekend is a big weekend for the Big Ten West. We're going to have our eyeballs. You're going to have your eyeballs. I'm going to have my eyeballs on a lot of Big Ten West teams because they all go down this week. Illinois has their spring game coming up on Thursday. That's tomorrow. Tomorrow night. You get the rare weeknight spring game for the Illinois Fighting Illini. Where do things land at the quarterback position? Altmaier versus Paddock. I think that's where things are sitting there for Illinois. I think Luke Altmaier is going to be the starting quarterback. We're going to talk about Minnesota. We're going to talk about Wisconsin. We're going to talk about Iowa. We're going to talk about all of these Big Ten West teams and their spring games, what to expect, storylines, previews, that kind of thing. Gerald McKinley chiming in. I think after all the Power 5 become the P2 and the P3, we'll see a small pause before retraction talk. That's interesting. Very, very interesting because we haven't really seen it. You kind of look back in the day, there's a really good channel out there that someone recommended me to. I think it's called D1360, where he's got histories of conference realignment and all sorts of really good information. So check it out if you haven't already after this live stream. But I'm watching that, and back in the day, there was some withdrawals and there was maybe some contraction. Are we ever going to get to a point where the Indianas, the Purdues, the Northwesterns, schools like that, there could be contraction in these conferences? I think it's something that needs to be talked about because if you have an even revenue distribution where Northwestern, and this was the issue I talked about a few weeks ago with Clemson and Florida State, they're looking at Purdue, they're looking at Indiana, they're looking at Northwestern, they're looking at Rutgers and saying, how are we making half of what they're making? We provide so much more pull on television than they do. I don't think the Big Ten would ever go to an unequal revenue distribution. I think an unequal revenue distribution is not great. The ACC has floated that idea around. I don't know if that's going to end well for them. I really don't. Clemson and Florida State and some of those bigger ACC schools, they're pushing for it. They're pushing for it. I just don't know if it's going to end well for them. I just don't know if an unequal revenue, I believe that leads to a lot of dissent between the teams that make the most money. Now they have a little bit more control over things. I just don't think that's a good thing. But will we see a point if we want to keep the even revenue distribution? Will we see a point where, we get to a point where, Northwestern, we want to pull in Oregon, we want to pull in Washington, Florida State, Notre Dame. We want to pull in all these schools, but Indiana and Purdue and all these schools, they're not pulling the wagon, so to speak. They don't draw. Now I know you need you need schools on the low end and you need schools on the high end, so to speak. I understand that. Not every school, all of a sudden you put in Miami, FSU, Clemson, USC, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan. You add all these schools into the same conference. One of these blue bloods is going to go 7-5. Is that what you want? You need some depth to a conference. Stanford and Cal, say what you want about them. They could add some depth to the conference. Northwestern, Purdue, Indiana. But I think that I do have that in my list of potential offseason videos. Are we ever going to get to a point in the Big Ten and other conferences? Are we ever going to talk about contraction? Are we ever going to talk about where you have to maintain a certain amount of something in order to remain members of the Big Ten Conference? Whatever that would be, academics, it might have happened with Nebraska, right? They lost their AAU status shortly after becoming members of the Big Ten Conference. Would they have gotten kicked out? Well, we brought in Nebraska to capitalize on their fan base all across the country, their football program that draws in a lot of numbers, regardless whether they're going 3-9 or 9-3. There's some slippery slopes that you got to tiptoe around. You're walking on that narrow trail on the side of a mountain. Trust me, I've been there. I've done that. I've tiptoed on the narrow trail on the side of the mountains in Montana. But metaphorically, that's what you're doing with these types of situations with contraction. That's what you're doing. Brian chiming in here tonight. We're going to get to those spring previews here, but I want to get through some of these comments here. As far as tying up the West Coast, Brian sees Oregon, Washington, Stanford going into Big Ten play, then targeting the ACC in 2034. There is this notion that conferences need to have an even number. And I don't know if you need to be honest with you. You do the math and you can figure out scheduling with an odd number. And now the NCAA says, well, if you're not over 12 teams, you don't need to have divisions anymore. I think that was the deal why conferences needed an even number, is because of, we need to have even divisions. We need to have 6 over here and we need to have 6 over here, 7 over here, 7 over here, 8 and 8, whatever. Now you don't need that. You can throw them all in, top 2 teams, conference championship game. So what's the need? If the need isn't there for an even number of teams, this might be a pretty good solution on the West Coast. Oregon, Washington, Stanford. That might be all you need. Maybe you don't need to bring in a Cal. You can stick with an odd number. COVID season, the ACC, I know COVID season was shortened and things were wonky, but they brought in Notre Dame and they had a 15-team conference. I don't think you absolutely need an even number of teams anymore because the rule used to be 12, I believe it was 12 or more teams, and you need to split it into divisions for football, for conference championship purposes. Now you don't need to do that anymore. That's why we're talking about 3-6-6 in the Big Ten for scheduling. That's why we're talking about top 2 teams making the conference championship game. That's why we're talking about these things. So, that a 19-team conference? Oregon, Washington, Stanford? That locks up most of the West Coast, and then you can wait on the ACC. You can look at a Notre Dame. You can look at a Florida State, a Georgia Tech. You can look at a North Carolina. Beyond those teams, I don't think the ACC really hauls in all that much, unless you want to go outside of your academic requirements and bring in something like Miami. Imagine having the South Florida, Miami, and the Southern California and LA recruiting markets. Those are two of the best right there. Two of the absolute best, but I think bringing Miami, you sacrifice a little bit on the academic side. Florida State is trying to get to AAU status. Will they get to that point? Maybe. Louis Paps, he wants Oregon, Washington, Georgia Tech, and Miami. I got some pushback when I said Georgia Tech, I don't know, a month or two ago. I know Atlanta is mostly Dog fans, mostly Georgia fans. And no one's doubting that. Georgia Tech brings things academically. They're okay. They're not bad athletically. They're probably better than Cal, when you compare those. So even though Cal might be a little bit better academically. Georgia Tech, Atlanta, Atlanta's another. We talked about recruiting and recruiting markets during this show. Man, like Lewis's suggestion here with Atlanta and Miami, and you add that to LA, now you're bringing in a lot of recruits in a lot of different areas that you're going to have to battle head-to-head with the SEC. Right now, when you're talking about, that's the beauty of this deal out west for the Big Ten. Who are you competing with? The Pac-12? The Big 12? You lap those guys by a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, 4 miles, revenue-wise, exposure-wise. You ain't competing with anybody out there. There's no Big Ten versus SEC Stanford scratching their chin and saying, which one do I go to? Where do I earn my $100 million? No, you're going to the Big Ten. SEC ain't going out west. SEC's waiting to pounce on those ACC schools, on the Miamis, the Florida States, the Clemsons. Maybe they bring Georgia Tech back into the fold after Georgia Tech left the conference in the 50s, I think. And remember, we've talked about this before. Even revenue, man. University presidents want to see their revenue keep on going up and up. That's probably, I said it last week, that's why they hired Tony Petitti, a guy that has all these relationships in television and looking to increase that television revenue. They don't want to split it up maybe with someone like a Cal that maybe doesn't bring in a lot. What does Stanford bring in? These are all things. Trust me, it takes a lot even for me to really learn, and I'm still learning how this process all works. But these are things that you got to continue to look at as we continue to go down the road of expansion. More from Sunshine Design. If you're up and around 18 teams, I could see an scenario where 4 teams tied for second place. Who gets into the conference championship? You got to develop a tiebreaker scenario, whatever that may be. You could do a average margin of victory. There's all sorts of things, even coming down to an old coin flip. Let's not settle a conference championship on a coin flip. I just want to make that clear. Okay. But when you look at all of this and you look at all of these things that keep on going down, I honestly believe so in this type of scenario, yeah, there's going to be issues. Maybe one point we get the top 4 teams and we play semifinals and then a championship game. But now, how many games are we playing? How many games are we asking these kids to continue to play? I think that's a question that needs to be asked. John chiming back in, saying Georgia Tech, gives us a toehold to poach SEC recruits. Georgia Tech and a potential Florida State. If you can grab one of those schools down in Florida, I think that's another big key. Florida is a ripe recruiting ground. You get a Florida school. Florida State's, I think, a little bit better academically, maybe fits in a little bit better, even though Miami is the better market down there. But There's potential down there, but you're going to be battling with the SEC because those are right in SEC territory. You got to think the SEC is going to grab Clemson. You got to think there's going to be competition because, like I've been saying this for weeks, I've been saying this for months. If the SEC wants to hold on to Atlanta, to Florida, to all these ripe recruiting grounds down there, they're going to block out the Big Ten. They might add Georgia Tech just so the Big Ten doesn't get into Atlanta. They might do a preemptive strike by doing that. It could happen, and it would not surprise me in the slightest to see that happen with the SEC. But the Big Ten, gotta have your eyes down south. Gotta have your eyes down in the southeast part of the country. Louis Papp wants to have his eyeball, speaking of eyes, down in Atlanta and Miami. Man, two awesome recruiting grounds. Jonathan Weaver checking into the stream tonight. Any chance of the Big Ten just bringing in Washington, Oregon, and Stanford? I just said it. Not sure if you just joined, but that would get you to 19. A lot of people have this notion that you need an even number of teams. Now that the NCAA doesn't require you to have a championship game, once you get over 12 teams, East Division, West Division, North, South, whatever, you can make an odd number of teams work. I firmly believe that. You can make that work. And this is a realistic possibility to get the Big Ten to 19 teams. Washington, Oregon, to Stanford. Why not? Why not? I'll maybe go over some financials next week on Big Ten TED Live, but Washington, Oregon, Stanford, that locks up the West Coast. When we talk about the West Coast becoming Big Ten country, you could forego Cal. As much as they bring academically, they bring research, I understand that. But remember, with our even revenue distribution, everybody's got to keep on making money. Everybody's got to get their piece of the pie. Where's it going to come from? Where's the value? Keep on saying that, but it's worth saying. I'll say that. It's definitely worth saying. Definitely worth saying. Jeffrey Thompson, Big Ten should have taken Stanford along with USC rather than the team across town. There was rumors that said USC and Oregon, but Fox wanted to own LA, and they were willing to put in the extra money to own Los Angeles. USC Stanford, USC Oregon. There were other, you don't need to own a market. Like we talk about the Bay Area. Like, I don't know if you need Stanford and Cal, but you lock in the Bay Area if you do. Because if Cal's kind of left out in all of this and they don't get a Big Ten invitation, Cal fits, they just slide right over to the Mountain West probably. I don't know where they would fit in athletically, but that's probably where they would slide in with the Washington States and the Oregon States of the world. So there's that. Good comments tonight. Appreciate everybody coming by for the live stream here tonight. Big Ten TED Live on a Wednesday night, every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern and 8 o'clock Central. I am in the Central time zone as this spring continues. Before I get into the spring football previews featuring Big Ten West teams, just a reminder, keep on chatting. Keep on talking about different topics. If you want me to bring up a different topic and talk about something else here during the show, I will do that as we get more towards the end of the program here tonight. Thanks, everybody, for stopping by. Let's talk about stuff on the field. Let's talk about what happens between the lines. Because if you are a Big Ten West fan, then this weekend is your weekend. Let's preview spring games. Let's talk Big Ten West football. I want to start first with the University of Minnesota. We're going to keep on going down the line, short previews here of each and every single one of these teams. Storylines, headlines, what to watch for in these spring football games featuring Big Ten West teams. Let's start with Minnesota. The development of Ethan Kaliak-Manis. I think he really came on last season, especially that last game of the season when they beat Wisconsin. He performed well, especially down the stretch when throws needed to be made, when plays needed to be made late in that game. Where's his development? How much has he developed as a quarterback? The Big Ten is a good conference in terms of quarterbacks. Where does he sit? I think he can be good. I just don't know how good he can be. Where's his development? Because when I look at the Golden Gopher offense, I do see some good things. I see some good things from Minnesota. I see Sean Tyler coming in, a transfer from Western Michigan, a running back. I see Zach Evans. I see Bryce Williams. I see some good players. I see Crab. I see that's Chris Ottman-Bell. I see Daniel Jackson. I see Corey Crooms, the transfer. I see Elijah Spencer, the transfer. I see good players in this receiving core. And then you talk about Brevin Spanford at tight end. Offensive line, that's something I want to keep an eye on. You got Quinn Carroll, but you're losing guys like John Michael Schmitz and Chuck Falanga. Where is the off? That was such a big part, huge part of Minnesota. Gigantic part of the Golden Gophers was their offensive line paving the way for Mo Ibrahim. If they don't have the horses, if they don't have the biceps on the Minnesota Moving Company moving forward, where does this offense sit? I'll get to offensive line with another team as well. But they've lost a lot on defense as well. You look at transfer, you look at Trill Carter, who just announced he's transferring to Texas. Smells like NIL. When you talk about, Braylon Oliver, you talk about Flip Dixon, you talk about guys that logged a lot of snaps on a Minnesota defense, you still got guys like Justin Wally, and you still got guys like Tyler Newman back there in the secondary. But then the front seven, how tough is this Minnesota team going to be? If there's one thing I know about Minnesota, Joe Rossi will put out a decent to good defensive product. I know that, and I know this is a developmental football program. PJ Fleck and his coaching staff gets the most out of these kids. It's annoying for some of their rivals, not Iowa, because Iowa knows how to solve the Minnesota puzzle. But for some of these other teams, it's, Minnesota, beginning of the year, maybe it looks like they're not going to have the great year, but hey, they find a way to get to 8-4. Let's talk about Nebraska for a minute. Let's talk about Nebraska. No Casey Thompson this spring because of an injury, but as of right now, it still looks he's going to be on campus in Lincoln this July, August, September, and beyond. Can Jeff Sims stand out as the quarterback? Look, if Jeff Sims goes out there and he puts together a great performance in the spring game, that's really going to separate him as an option at the quarterback position for the University of Nebraska. I believe a really good performance in this game could take them to the next level, could take Jeff Sims and this offense to the next level at the University of Nebraska. I really believe that. If he has a so-so game, if it's fine, then you're going to continue to have this competition talk. And even if he has a really good game, you're probably still going to have the competition talk. But he can really set himself apart if he has a really good game in the spring game. I want to talk about those SEC, those Georgia transfers. MJ Sherman on defense, Eric Gilbert at tight end, Chief Borders, and others on this defense that are probably slated to be in starting positions. How do those transfers mesh in? Eric Gilbert and Thomas Fedoni have a chance to be the best tight end combination, maybe in the Big Ten, maybe outside of the one at Iowa with Eric All and with Luke Lachey. But there's a chance for that Nebraska tight end room. I want to see how those transfers, they've done a lot. That's kind of what you have to do as a first-year head coach to kind of get what you want. You kind of got to go into the transfer portal and make it happen. At Nebraska. Iowa. You got to look at Cade McNamara. You got to look at a guy that we really haven't seen play a lot of football in 2 years. I know he was kind of flip-flopping starts there with J.J. McCarthy in the beginning of this last season. But for the most part, we haven't seen Cade McNamara for 2 years play a lot of meaningful football. Where is he as a quarterback? How has he developed over this time where he hasn't been playing football against Big Ten defenses. I want to see where he's at. Someone's got to step up at wide receiver. Someone's got to step up as a target for Cade McNamara to throw to. Who's that going to be? Is there going to be a guy right now that we don't know about that's going to step up? Of course, Brody Brecht announced that he's going to focus on baseball and won't be on football this year. Who's it going to be? Beyond Seth Anderson, Nico Regaini, beyond Deontay Vines, who's going to step up for the Hawkeyes? And I want to look at their offensive line depth. So go the Hawkeyes this year. I should say, so go the offensive line. The Hawkeyes will go right behind them. Okay, because Iowa is in a big situation. Iowa is in a situation where they need the offensive line to protect Cade McNamara because Cade McNamara is great. He had a Joe Moore Award-winning offensive line in front of him at Michigan. Iowa, they were young. They're developing. I get that, but they are not that Michigan offensive line of 2021. They're not. Will Cade McNamara be able to be consistently under pressure if this offensive line isn't great, so to speak? If he's consistently under pressure, how is Cade McNamara going to react to that? Because, man, he had time to throw when he was at Michigan. He had all kinds of time to sit back there, make a sandwich, and deliver a throw to some of those maize and blue wide receivers. How's Cade McNamara going to be? I think this Iowa team overall is going to improve. This is an Iowa team. I'll admit, I maybe didn't think this in January. I didn't think this in February. We were just coming off a season where Iowa was, they received a lot of scrutiny. Some of it deserved. But this was but now as time continues to go by, we settle into the offseason, we talk about transfer portal, we talk about all these things, right? We talk about all these things, kind of that the boxes that get checked. Iowa's still going to be great on defense. They're still going to be outstanding on the defensive side of the football because Phil Parker is still alive and walking the earth. And they continue to recruit great talent on defense. They continue to bring in, lots of good players on the back end, on the front seven. I want to look at their linebackers on defense. Justin Jacobs was maybe slated to be in that role. He's out, transferred to Oregon. There's some guys that I think that can step up, but I look at their defensive line and I look at their secondary that are really good. Defensive line is really deep. Okay, there's some guys that were maybe second on the depth chart or whatever that got action last year, that saw action, that are going to be really, 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 one more time, really good. They're going to step up, and a few of those guys are going to step out. Logan Lee is one of those guys that I have an eye on. There's a couple of guys, Noah Shannon, I think, and Logan Lee they're not your typical defensive line. They're a little bit, some might say, undersized, especially for your interior defensive linemen, I think. But I think they'll be fine. I'm not really worried about that. But linebackers, who's going to step up? Because Iowa had a generational pair of linebackers in Jack Campbell and Seth Benson. Now, better parts of your defense is maybe on other parts. The Ball Hawkeyes are still going to be in the secondary. Cooper DeJean, the turnover machine. Quinn Schulte, Xavier Nwapa. You keep on going down the list of this secondary, and they're still going to be there. They're still going to be fine. They'll figure it out at linebacker. I'm not worried about it. I just want to see who steps up, who they view as some of those top guys on defense. So that's where I'm at with the Iowa Hawkeyes. Let's talk about Wisconsin. The hype train has arrived on Regent Street in Madison, Wisconsin. And I'll talk about that tomorrow on the channel. You'll see that video tomorrow. But I want to see in the spring game, we're talking about the launch. I want to see the chemistry between Tanner Mordecai and these wide receivers. Okay, you talk about returning wide receivers. You look at your Skylar Bells. You look at your drawing a blank. Chemre Dike, you look at guys like that. Then you look at your transfers. Will Pauling, Bryson Green, CJ Williams. You look at guys like that. I want to see the chemistry. Because we know the talent that Tanner Mordecai is. We know how deep the Wisconsin wide receiver core is. Let's see the chemistry. Adjustments to a new defensive scheme. Jim Leonhard had this defense as one of the best in the Big Ten, one of the best in college football. New scheme, 3-3-5 coming in to Madison. Linebackers look good. Like they're kind of the anti-Iowa. I like what their linebackers look like, but D-line and secondary, I don't know. We'll see how that continues to develop for Wisconsin. Northwestern, man, I'm going to make this quick because I like to be a positive person. Got to figure it out at quarterback. Brendan Sullivan seems to be the guy. Believe it or not, Ryan Helinski is still on the roster. Even though, remember when Ryan Helinski had that great game against Nebraska and we all thought, here we go. We're off to the races. It's an even year. Northwestern's going to contend. Didn't work out that way. Can you build an offense around Cam Porter? Can you replace? What can you build on the offensive line after losing Peter Skoronski? Can you build around Bryce Gallagher on defense? It's tough. I just don't know if they nailed the transfer portal like maybe they wanted to. It's a tough situation at Northwestern. Another year like they've been going at Northwestern. And you might need to talk about a transition plan with Pat Fitzgerald. That's the way I look at it right now. It's tough. It's tough right now for Patty Fitz. That this has been a team that when they're good, they play ugly football. They play good defensive football. They don't make mistakes. But, man, you're coming off a season of 1-11. You're coming off a season where, you lost to an FCS team. You probably should have went 0-12. It's hard. But if someone can turn it around, Pat Fitzgerald might be able to turn it around. I love him as a head coach. In his time as a head coach, what's it been, 15 some odd years? In his time as a head coach, he may have gotten the most out of his talent over any other coach. Other coaches recruit really well, but when you're talk about getting a lot out of a little, Pat Fitzgerald might do it better than just about anybody out there in the Big Ten. Going to get to some comments here right now. I see some comments coming in talking about this Big Ten chat right now. Quickly before we come back to these spring game previews, Lewis Papp talking about maybe Oregon State and Washington State to the Big 12. Value. Corvallis, Pullman. Not sure where they're at market-wise. I'll just say that. Sunshine Design says, go for quarterback play. Will give the league fits. Ethan Kaliak-Manis. How many steps forward can Ethan take? I think that's a big question that a lot of people are asking right now. We saw flashes of it. Kind of took him a little bit. That Penn State game was a tough game to kind of come in for the first time. He's got good receivers. He's got good people to throw to. Minnesota's a team I could see him going 5-7. I could maybe see him going 7-5 or 8-4, but man, their schedule's tough. Drawing Michigan and Ohio State from the East. That's a tough draw. Tough draw. J-Man 34. I can't wait to see what Luke Fickell does at Wisconsin. Me and you both. They're going to be up there. They're going to be winning 8 to 10 games a year. That would not surprise me. This year's going to be a little bit interesting because you got Tanner Mordecai for a year. Nick Evers, Braden Locke are in there as well. They continue to recruit pretty well, but he said it at his introductory press conference. He doesn't want to rely on the transfer portal a ton. Realizes it's a tool, but you don't want to rely on it a ton. You want to recruit and keep your kids here and build a culture and build a program. J-Man 34 also thinks that Cade McNamara is the real deal. The more I think about this, because I think about this all the time. I think about it at work. I think about it at home. I think about it at dinner. I think about it at breakfast. I think about it at lunch. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, Cade's been there. He's done that. He protects the football. When he was in 2021 at Michigan, he didn't turn it over, I think, until that Nebraska game, which was maybe, game 5, game 6 of the season. He is built for that Iowa system. He's built to play with a good defense. He's built to play with a running game. Caleb Johnson is a guy that can provide. When we talk, I might do a video later, maybe your June, July, once we kind of get past spring ball, once we get past this transfer portal period, talk about who's going to break out Talked about surprise teams, maybe surprise players. It wouldn't be a surprise to me to see Caleb Johnson break out, but Caleb Johnson, I think, can be a guy. If that offensive line is sturdy and steady, Caleb Johnson is the guy that can break out in the Big Ten this season. Our resident, speaking of the Hawkeyes, resident Hawkeye, Erica, checking in. Seth Anderson will be one of the ones to step up if he recovers from his surgery. Seth Anderson, transfer, coming in from Charleston Southern, had a great freshman year there. He's a fairly young kid, but it appears, I think, he can come in and do it out there. I do have an email, crab cakes and football. So if anybody wants to get involved, that's another good way to kind of reach out to me. Hey, I'd like to see this video idea. I'd like to see this. That's another good way. Hey, certain things like that, big10ted@gmail.com is a way to reach me out there. Sunshine Design, Iowa games will get eyeballs with Cade. Looking forward to Iowa in primetime. I mentioned it before. I work in the TV production industry. I'm a local replay operator here doing Wolves games, Twins games, Wild games, all that, Gopher games, all that sort of stuff. When I talk about that and I look at it from a TV production standpoint, Iowa-Michigan writes itself in the Big Ten championship game. Cade feeling that he felt wronged in the situation how it went down with J.J. McCarthy at Michigan, and now transfers to Iowa, and then he said in that first interview, hey, keep telling us we stink. Watch us. Watch and see what happens. The hype video, the tease writes itself. It writes itself. Erica also chiming in with the Big Ten MVP, Tory Taylor. He will singularly change a game with a swing of a leg. Pinning teams consistently within the 12 or within the 10-yard line. Man, it seems like this guy has been playing forever. But I think he's finally a senior. Right there. But Tory Taylor, man. Tory Taylor can single-handedly change a game. Did I remember correctly that Tory Taylor was not a finalist for the Ray Guy Award last year? I believe that's what it was. That was like, how is that even possible? Sunshine Designs hoping Jack Campbell makes his way to Chicago to play for the Fighting Kevin Warrens and the Chicago Bears. Boy, Jack Campbell on the Bears. That just makes sense. There's maybe Dick Butkus 2.0, Brian Urlacher maybe 2.0 for that Chicago Bears team. Mike chiming in. Likes Iowa. Hope they do good over there. Lewis Papp thinks Wisconsin wins the West at 10-2. Losses to Ohio State and someone else. Maybe Iowa in there as well. They had 2 Big Ten losses. We'll see what Iowa's got to play Penn State in a crossover as well. So some of the East Division crossover, the East-West Division crossovers should be interesting, and these are games. Another video I will probably do coming down the pike here as we get closer. I want to talk about a certain number of games that are going to determine who plays for the Big Ten Championship, because I think there are games out there. I look at early game. Penn State, Illinois is a swing game, an upset alert possibly for Penn State early in the season. Penn State, Iowa is fair. I think because Penn State goes back to back with Illinois and Iowa. At first glance, you might think, well, yeah, it's early season. It's tough, but that may take a toll. Those are 2 tough and physical games back to back for the Penn State Nittany Lions that folks are going to have to watch out for. We are in the midst of a transfer portal period. I said it earlier in the show that maybe right here and right now, we're not in a situation where a ton of kids that maybe had a lot of playing time or were big parts last year are entering the portal. But I think it's going to happen as you get more of these spring games and spring practice comes to a close, these kids are able to sit back, they're able to reflect a little bit, and then they're going to realize, well, I should probably go somewhere else. So watch until the end of April. Watch until the end of April. And that's, I think, when we're going to see a lot of these things happen. Once we get to the end of the month, once we get to the end of these spring games, then maybe we're going to see, because we still got, like in the Big Ten, we got Rutgers and Maryland that play on the 29th. Okay, so you could still have kids enter the portal after that happens. I think that's one thing that we have to keep in mind through all of this. There is still time for these things to go down. There is still time for all of this to happen. So we'll see if these things do indeed happen, and we'll see if more kids end up entering the transfer portal as we continue to go along here throughout this season and throughout the transfer period. Thanks, everybody, for coming aboard here on Big Ten Ted Live tonight. Here's what we got coming up on the channel later on this week. Tomorrow, is Wisconsin overrated? Are they overhyped? I will break that down in a 10-minute segment tomorrow. And then coming up on Friday, we're going to talk about if the Big Ten expands to the Southeast, your Florida States, your Miamis, your Georgia Techs, teams like that, if they expand to the Southeast, does that allow for the Big Ten to overtake the SEC on the field because of the recruiting grounds that it pulls with it? That is coming up on Friday as well. So make sure you stay tuned for that here on the channel. Got some other Iowa fans. Can we talk about how much Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Nebraska suck? Go Hawks. Got a Hawkeye fan. They don't suck. They don't suck, but it's going to be competitive in the West, folks. It's going to be competitive in the West Division this season. It's going to be really, really fun to see the West go back and forth. If you wanted to see back and forth football, if you wanted to see competitive football, I really hope the Big Ten West doesn't get the rap this year that they're a bad league. If everybody beats up on each other, I really hope we don't get to a point where, oh, look, the leader has 3 losses. The leader has this many losses. Nobody's ranked. Which I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think we're going to get the stuff that we got last year. I think the cream is going to rise to the top. The Wisconsins, the Iowas, those teams are going to rise to the top. But, you know, it's college football. It's Big Ten football. We are going to see some stuff back and forth. We're going to see upsets. That's the name of the game. That's why we love this sport. Okay? So I just don't want to see that slander, so to speak, against the Big Ten West. I don't want to see us get to that point because there are good teams. There are good teams. Can the coaching staffs get the most out of these teams? Who's going to step up? Then there are great coaches in the Big Ten West. You look at your Kirk Ferentz. You look at your Luke Fickell. You look at your Brett Bielema. You look at your PJ Fleck. You look at your Matt Rule, even Pat Fitzgerald. You know, Ryan Walters at Purdue. I mean, there are really good coaches in the Big Ten West division, ladies and gentlemen. There are great coaches in the Big Ten West. And this just might be one of those divisions where teams just might beat up on each other for a little bit. But we'll see who comes out on top. Whoever comes out on top and plays in Indianapolis is going to be stronger because of it in the Big Ten West this season. Once again, guys, if you want to talk about a certain topic, you want to talk about something else, the chat and the phone lines is a great place to do that as we kind of wind down towards the end of our program here. Mike chiming in. Nebraska will have a few upsets this year finally. Would be curious to see which upsets you're talking about, which teams they could upset this year. Nebraska is one of those teams. They have not, Nebraska has had the talent. I don't think there's any doubt about that. They had the talent under Scott Frost. It's just putting it into wins. It's just putting these one-score losses into victories and making it happen. That's where I see this for Nebraska. I'm very curious to see where they end up in year number 1. 3-loss leader may not play well in the Big Ten West. I'm fine with a 9-3 team. That's fine. But I think it's best for the Big Ten. I think the best chances for the Big Ten West to have a top 10 or a top 15 team, look at the flag behind me, the best chances I think are Iowa and Wisconsin. I honestly believe that's where we're at with all this. Probably Wisconsin just a smidge more than Iowa just because of their offense. Minnesota, I think their schedule is just a little bit too tough this season. I look at Nebraska, it's year 1. I know I shouldn't judge based on the Frost staff. And I know I shouldn't judge them based on that, but I've just been fooled too many times by Nebraska. I've been proven wrong too many times by Nebraska to really believe that they're going to turn it around and Nebraska all of a sudden is going to win 7 games, 8 games, 9 games. I want to see it first. I think that's where I'm at with this. I want to see it on the field. I want to see it happen. I want to see the development. Erica chiming in once again, thinking Iowa's going to win at least 9 games. As I was pulling that up, I did pull up the Iowa schedule. I think the toughest game for the Hawkeyes, September 23rd, they got to go on the road to Penn State. I think that's going to be a tough one. It's going to be a difficult game going on the road to Happy Valley. Penn State's a great team, folks. This could be a playoff team. I will say this. That is the week after Penn State plays Illinois. Could be beat up. This could be a beat up Penn State team. And also keep in mind this. Illinois is a great defensive team. When I look at Illinois and I look at Iowa, I'm not saying personnel-wise they're very comparable, but these are 2 of the best defenses in the Big Ten. I believe Kirk Ferentz is going to pop in that tape. Phil Parker is going to pop in that tape from the Penn State-Illinois game, and they're going to look at it, and they're going to say, wow, if Illinois, because Illinois front 7 is very good, and if Illinois does well defensively, they're going to be able to replicate a lot of those things on defense. So Iowa kind of has an advantage there, but going on the road to Penn State, not going to be easy for anybody. That Wisconsin game on October 14th is going to swing a lot of things, I think, in one direction or another. I'll talk about it in the video tomorrow about Wisconsin, but the Badgers will probably be 5-0. Their toughest games in that stretch are Washington State and Purdue, both road games. So I think Wisconsin's going to start off 5-0, and Iowa, if they're not undefeated, they'll probably be a 1-loss team with the Penn State game there. Michigan State and Purdue, both at home. I think those will go fairly well for the Hawkeyes. So that could be a huge game between Iowa and Wisconsin. But Iowa gets Minnesota at home. They haven't had trouble with the Gophers. They've been able to find a way to beat them as of late. They get Illinois at home late in the season and then Nebraska. So when Erica talks about 9 wins, maybe a Penn State loss, maybe a Wisconsin loss, and then maybe someone like an Illinois or a Michigan State or something like that. So a 9-win season, not out of the realm of possibility. Very realistic. I even look at 10 wins. It depends on a lot of factors for Iowa to get to that point, but I believe that they can. They can get to that point if everything comes together for the black and gold in Iowa City. Sunshine Design thinks Northwestern will double their win total this season, get a grand total of 2 wins. When I look at Northwestern, they play UTEP at home and they play Howard at home. They should win those games, but they also lost to a not good FCS team last year. They played Duke on the road. That first game between Northwestern and Rutgers is going to tell us a lot about either team. That's a very interesting home opener, or a very interesting opener. Going on the road to Rutgers for Northwestern. It's going to tell a lot about where certain teams are right here and right now at this point in the season. Very much looking forward to that matchup. Should be fun. We've got a lot more to break down as this offseason continues to wind down. Of course, expansion is a hot topic. We talk about all these previews coming up. Once the spring gets in and once we settle down a little bit, then you got to go with the deep dives of kind of some of these teams. Where these teams, once we get into May, once we get into June, then we really got to really find out, okay, these rosters are set. What does each team look like as we continue to go down the pike in terms of where these teams line up? There's going to be behind me. You look behind me. Wrong way. Here we go. You look behind me at that flag. Someone's gonna. I did a surprise. Who's going to be the surprise team of the Big Ten? I think Illinois. I know that's not much of a surprise, but maybe a surprise being winning 8 games 2 years in a row might be the surprise to some people. Someone's going to surprise. Is it going to be Nebraska? Is everything finally going to come together in Lincoln? Is it finally going to happen in Lincoln, Nebraska? Is Minnesota going to pull off an upset? Minnesota has the ability to start well, but man, it is a tough finish to the schedule for the Golden Gophers. I'll tell you that much. Tough finish to the schedule for Minnesota. Purdue, I mean, I don't see it at Purdue right now. Their offense could come together with, I've heard very good reports from Hudson Card out of there. The more time that goes by, the more it appears that Milton Wright will not return to the program. He was the second leading receiver on the team behind David Bell a couple of years back. So they have guys in that, the Sheffields, the Brock Thompsons of the world. They have receivers that can maybe contribute. I just don't know if they can turn it around right now. I think they're going to take a step back. It'll be interesting to see how much of a step back Purdue takes, but their goal has got to try to get back to bowl eligibility here this year. But, Michigan State is a very interesting team. Michigan State is because Peyton Thorne is an experienced quarterback. They've improved on defense. It looks like their personnel could allow them to put better defenses on the field. They bring in Nathan Carter, who is a transfer running back from UConn, to go with Jalen Berger. They've got Keon Coleman and Trey Mosley on the outside. Like, Michigan State is interesting. And I think they could be a solid team. Are they going to win 10 or 11 games like they did a few years back? No, I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen. Just don't foresee that happening. Mike brings up a good point. I know I've heard a lot about this. The Colorado, Nebraska, this coaching war that we're trying to generate, or that the media is trying to generate right now. Like this deal where Matt Rule goes out and says, I want to coach my guys. Where Dion is like, hey, you know where to find me. Come on. Like, this is not that big of a deal, folks. And if you wanted to make a big deal, fine. Like, it's fine to go back and forth. But, like, to make this one guy's right or one guy's wrong, no. These are just two different ways to approach the transfer portal. And here's what I'll say about Colorado. At first, I'm like, interesting. Deion Sanders, the Colorado, very interesting, right? This program has been in the dumps they had that 1 year, I believe it was 2016, 2017, somewhere in there, where Mike McIntyre took the Buffs to, I think they went 10-3. They took Colorado to the Pac-12 title game before getting obliterated by somebody. I forgot who it was. Colorado, for the better part of like 20 years, has been one of the worst teams in the Power 5. Deion Sanders comes in there after this team went 1-11. The same record as Northwestern. And now all of a sudden, transfer. And now all of a sudden, I'm going to put my kid at quarterback. And now all of a sudden, in a conference with Bo Nix, DJU, with Caleb Williams, and the list goes on and on at quarterback, all of a sudden now Colorado's going to win 8 games. All of a sudden, Colorado's going to be, look, I understand the players that they brought in. I understand Travis Hunter coming into the system. It's a big jump going from FCS to where he was to go into Power 5, especially in a conference that's probably actually not going to be too bad this year in the Pac-12. They're actually probably going to be pretty decent. Shedeur Sanders is going to have some time. They're going to have to, there's going to be some time to get used to the speed of Pac-12 football, of FBS football, of Power 5 football. My early prediction, things can change. I think Nebraska loses close to Minnesota on the road. First game, maybe things aren't totally together, but they bounce back on the road and take out Colorado. I don't know about Deion Sanders. I think it worked at the FCS level. It was different. It was easy to kind of recruit players to that level, better players to that level, and then be successful. Now, instead of recruiting against Montana State, North Dakota State, South Dakota State, and some of the HBCU schools that are powers down there, now you're competing against USC. Now it's Utah. It's all these better schools. So you can continue to recruit, and I'll give credit to Deion Sanders. I think he's going to turn it at least a little bit around. But this idea that all of a sudden Colorado is going to win 8 to 10 games every year, forget about it. It's going to take a while if they get to that point. That's what I think. Nebraska, I think, is going to become bowl eligible before Colorado does. If you want a bold prediction, there it is. There it is. There it is. Some talk about Mel Tucker here in the chat. This is very interesting. Tony chiming in saying Mel Tucker is a huge unknown. Mel Tucker is a big unknown right now. Yeah, one really good year, one down year. This has got to be, I made a video a while back about what are the expectations got to be for Michigan State? Michigan State fans, what are your expectations? Went way up. After 2020, you went way up, and then you come down. Where is Michigan State as a program? Where are we? Where do the Spartans go from here? I think as a program, they're around a 6 to 8 win program. But I know fans aren't going to like that because they had that high year back in 2021. They just paid Mel Tucker. Are you paying Mel Tucker $10 million a year or whatever it is, $9.5, $10 million a year? Are you paying him that money to win 6 and 7 games a year? No. But if you fire him, that's a big buyout that costs your school a lot of money. So you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place a little bit with Michigan State. I made a video even further back than that about Mel Tucker saying stuck state. Michigan State stuck. And a lot of people, I'll admit, a lot of people got on my case. But they could be stuck. Because, hey, if he goes 5 and 7 and goes 6 and 6, yeah, we want to get rid of the guy. Now we got to pay tens of millions. It's like Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M. You can't fire him because look at that buyout that you got to pay. There's a lot going on there. Mel Tucker needs to prove it, and this might be a prove it year for Michigan State. Tony, yes, they do. Michigan State will play Washington. It is in East Lansing this season. It will be tough. Washington is going to be a really good team this year. Michael Penix, maybe dark horse Heisman candidate. You could talk about him in that type of category. Man, remember we're talking about Michael Penix. Remember all of this stuff that went on with him at Indiana, and then he kind of fell off the wagon. Remember he had that bad game against Iowa early in the season in 2021, I believe. He kind of had that bad year. And then he could transfer to Washington, and now he's lighting it up over there in the Pac-12. Lighting up at the Pac-12. That's what happens when you don't have to play Iowa, right? Michigan State starts with Central Michigan and Richmond, and Washington and Maryland, all 4 games at home to start the season. So you probably start 2-0. Washington and Maryland and Iowa in 3 consecutive weeks is going to be tough. Maryland is going to be they're going to be right around probably where they've been. Iowa on the road is going to be extremely difficult for Michigan State. That's going to be very, very tough to pull off. Very tough to pull off. Erica brings up the point, and Kenneth Walker. It brought up Kenneth Walker. Some people have said, well, it's more than that. Now, Kenneth Walker masked issues on the offensive line. Okay, Kenneth Walker, because they had issues on the offensive line. It just, he helped everything. The running game, it led Peyton Thorne to a better season. Look what Peyton Thorne did last year. Didn't get it going. Jalen Berger kind of got going a little bit more towards the end of the year. But man, did Kenneth Walker make Mel Tucker a lot of money. That's the way it's looking right now. Mel Tucker has recruited pretty well. It's just, and this is a defensive guy. This is a defensive coach. Where are the great defenses? These defenses are bad. Very bad, especially against the pass. And now losing Xavier Henderson back there in the secondary, it's not going to get any better, I don't think, for Michigan State. Front seven's better. Secondary might need some work. Mike chiming in. The West and the Big Ten needs to work at this year. Feeling good about all of them. Also, Mike, thank you for the support. Thank you for the super chat. It's a great way to support the channel here at Big Ten Ted and keep everything going the way it's going. We are growing. We are progressing. Appreciate everybody for coming along for the ride, including Mike. Thanks for coming aboard here. Erica at Kinnick. I mean, Kinnick Stadium. When you talk about stadiums, when a lot of people maybe outside of the Big Ten circles talk about stadiums, Michigan, they list the big ones, right? Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State. Kinnick, man, especially at night, maybe those afternoon that turn into night games, those mid-afternoon time slots. It's tough. The fans are right there on top of you. It is loud. Of course, the pink locker room for the visitors' locker room. Iowa is right up there for a tough place to play. It is never easy to go into. What did Michigan have? Didn't they have like the Kinnick curse coming into this last year, I believe? So it's not there. Tony brings up an interesting point, and I have this on my list of potential videos as we continue throughout the offseason. Maryland could knock off a big dog. I'll just a little teaser for you here. Maryland. Is this the year that they knock off a Michigan, a Penn State, or an Ohio State? Those teams are real good. Those teams are awesome. But can Maryland do it? Can Maryland do it? They brought in Caden Prather, a wide receiver transfer from West Virginia. Jashawn Jones returns, but they've lost some talent at the wide receiver position. Corey Dyke just returns a tight end. This is still going to be a really good Roman Harper. Not Roman Harper. Roman Hemby. Roman Harper, I think, used to be like a safety for the Packers back in the day. Roman Hemby as well. is back there at the running back position. So, there's chances for Maryland. It's all about defense for them. Can they improve on the defensive side of the football? Eric is sick and tired. I'm sick and tired of hearing how good the Soviets are. I'm sick and tired about coaches who recruit well but end up doing horrible and can't develop at all. Scott Frost is there. He consistently had top 5 in the Big Ten, top 25 to 30 classes nationally, didn't develop it. A lot of those kids entered the transfer portal. Not using that as an excuse. I'm using that as you can't keep your kids here. You can't find a way to implement them. Something's wrong with your program. That's the way I view that this year for Nebraska. Nebraska. Who's going to be the next? Is the guys who are highly touted hires, but maybe can't get it done. I don't know who's next. I don't like to predict who's next. I like to remain positive. I like to remain a positive guy. But yeah, we'll see. When I look back at Scott Frost, and Mike kind of chimes in here, Mike himself never liked Frost. Bo is the coach. Bo did great. When you go back to that coaching cycle, I probably still would have hired Scott Frost. I know that's really weird to say in hindsight, but at the time, he was the home run guy, Nebraska kid. He just led UCF to an undefeated season. But I think the problem with Scott Frost was the maturity, his lack of experience. Because remember, he was only a head coach for 2 years. Or was it? No, it was 2 years. It was 2. I thought it was only a year. But it was 2 years. He was a coordinator at Oregon for a long time. And Nebraska was looking to strike while the iron was hot. But in my opinion, this is just me talking, I honestly believe that it was his lack of experience, his lack of maturity, and Nebraska. Like, there's Big Ten programs, but Nebraska and the expectations and the fan base, it's a different level, man. It's a different level. New AD coming in, sure as hell, probably didn't help any things as well. Trev Alberts is one of the very best athletic directors in the Big Ten, man. I love all the things that Trev has done. Trev Alberts, bringing back Herbie, a new mascot in the overalls, and just everything he's done. Everything he's done has been really, really good at Nebraska, and Nebraska's going in a very good direction right now as an athletic department and as an athletic program. Also, how about the script Terps coming back? I like how Maryland maybe going with a better design on their helmet. Been a lot of talk about who's got the best helmets and maybe uniform combinations in the Big Ten. I like the more traditional, the red with the script Terps on the side. I like that was announced this week that Maryland is going to that uniform combination as well this season. So looking forward to that. Big Ten. You see a lot of more solid colors, a lot of very good traditional helmet and uniform combinations, and I think Maryland getting in on the act with what they're doing. And I saw the video put out with Frank Reich and Boomer Esiason from back in the day. And when you think of Maryland, a lot of times you don't think of tradition, but you watch that video and say, hey, maybe this could be them embracing their tradition. As well. Tony chiming in and saying he loved those Maryland script helmets. I think that's the way to go. I like the Maryland state flag, but putting all that stuff they put on a helmet, I think was a little bit too busy. Were they trying to be like the Oregon of the Big Ten with these different uniform combinations? Maybe. But going more traditional, I think is the way to go as well. But differentiating opinions are also important as well. Some people like the checkered helmet, like Matt here. So going back and forth. A lot of colors. A lot of colors on the Maryland flag that I know in the state of Maryland. They fly that flag proud. And it's displayed in a lot of areas over there in Crab Cake Country. Good show, good comments tonight, everybody. I think we're going to shut it down for the night. Really appreciate everybody for coming by on the live stream once again every Wednesday night, 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central. But before we get to that, wow, right at the very last minute, Vince Watson coming in, Tony coming in. Now we got questions. The comeback is on. Vince Watson. These are good questions. Which coach has the hottest seat coming into next season? All right, let's talk about some hot seat stuff. I think you got to start with Pat Fitzgerald. This program continues to take steps down. And Northwestern is used to going down, coming back up, going down, coming back up, going down, coming back up, that kind of thing. But they're not coming back up. They're going further and further and further and further down. That's the direction that Northwestern is going. And this guy, they're going to build a statue in front of that new stadium. And hopefully the neighbors don't make too much of a fuss and they actually build the stadium. But when I look at hot seat, I think you got to start with Pat Fitzgerald. I think that's where you got to start with all this stuff. What he's done as a player for that program, what he's done for a coach of that program has been great. But, man, you continue to have 1 and 2 win seasons. You look at the schedule, you look at the teams right now in the Big Ten, just look at the flag behind me. Is Northwestern better than any of those teams? We're going to find out. In that first game, they got to go on the road to Rutgers. And we know where Rutgers has been as a program. Rutgers has gotten better, but we know where they've been as a program. When I look at Northwestern right now, it's hard for me. What does he got to do to keep his job? These back-to-back seasons that they've just been bad. They are bad. And a change in scenery may help. And it would have to be probably Pat Fitzgerald resigning or some type of mutual agreement at Northwestern. And Erica chimes in, who are they going to replace him with? Who's going to come to Northwestern? I honestly don't know. I don't know. It's going to be a G5 coach. I don't know. That's what makes this so difficult. You got to think like Pat Fitzgerald is in a situation where, he seems to be the right guy, but we've been doing this for a long time. He's one of the longest tenured coaches in the country. And at some point, you need a fresh look. And Northwestern might need a fresh look. Wisconsin needed a fresh look. Now, Wisconsin wasn't not nearly at the level that Northwestern was. But along with Pat Fitzgerald, getting back to your question there, Vince. In terms of hot seat, you got to look at Northwestern. I think there's a couple of more options. I look at Tom Allen at Indiana. You keep on having these losing seasons. You had a great year in 2020. But right now, and I know you've had some 8-win seasons before that, but that's a program that's kind of declining a little bit. Can the transfer of Taven Jackson make a difference? I think that's where we want to see right now, because maybe that's a team they've recruited pretty well, transfers pretty well. Can they all put it together? It's going to be extremely difficult in that division. I'd say Tom Allen is on the hot seat as well, and then Mel Tucker. I think you look at Mel Tucker, I think the thing that's protecting him is his contract. Right now, that long contract he signed last season. But, the buyout is hella expensive. Very expensive for Mel Tucker. So, I don't know. That's very hard to see them firing Mel Tucker at this point in time. But those are the three guys that really stand out to me in terms of hot seats. Let's go with some more here. We've got some more comments coming in. Tony, odds of Rutgers making a bowl game. Well, in order to really talk about that, we got to pull up their schedule now, don't we? We got to talk about their schedule. When you look at Rutgers, let's talk about the start of their season. All home games. Northwestern, Temple, Virginia Tech. They could go 3-0. It's possible that they could go 3-0 to start the season. I think Virginia Tech they weren't great last year. So they go 3-0 at Michigan, 3-1. They come back against Wagner at home. Rutgers could get out to a 4-1 start. Would not surprise me at all for Rutgers to get out to a 4-1 start. Then what do you got to do? You got to find 2 more wins for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. I'm going to list off some teams here. At Wisconsin, Michigan State, at Indiana, Ohio State, at Iowa, at Penn State, Maryland. So if we're starting at the bottom, you got to look at Indiana. You got to beat Indiana. I don't think Rutgers gets to a bowl game if they lose on the road in Bloomington, Indiana. Michigan State at home is probably the next one for me. When I look at Michigan State at home, I know that's going to be tough. That's going to be tough. I think Michigan State's a good team. I think Michigan State's much better talent-wise than Rutgers. But Rutgers plays a messy style. They play a style where they can get bowling shoe ugly and they can grind one out. You're not winning at Wisconsin. You're not winning at Iowa. You're not winning at Penn State. It's Maryland. It probably comes down, you got to beat Indiana, and then you got to beat one of Michigan State or Maryland. And right now, I just don't see it. It's going to be hard. I think it's going to be hard. Rutgers has got to find a way to pull an upset somewhere. They got to find a place to pull an upset. And in my opinion, it's a home game against Michigan State or it's a home game against Maryland. That's where I see the upsets coming for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. And what about David Shaw? David Shaw had a good run after Jim Harbaugh at Stanford. I know he's out there, maybe at Iowa, right? That was kind of similar. Rutgers. Stanford was a very physical football team. That could maybe blend into the Iowa style, but I know David Shaw is still out there. Still out there. Buckshot Kid, I don't think so. How can you be in the hot seat when you win 11 games a year? 11 games. I don't think he's even resorted back to 10 games. Here's a question from Tony. Is Chip Kelly safe with a 6-6 season? So here's the thing with USC and UCLA. Maybe more UCLA and maybe more UCLA than USC. Chip Kelly's in a situation where there's more pressure on him. Now you got more money coming into your program. There's going to be higher expectations at UCLA. Expectations are always going to be high at USC. But the expectations are going to be higher at UCLA. So what you got to do right now with the Bruins is Chip Kelly's got to go out there and have a good season. I know Dante Moore is right there waiting in the wings. He's waiting in the wings. I think you gotta really, what Chip Kelly has to show this year, he's got to show big time progress going into the Big Ten. He's got to show that these transfers and this recruiting is paying off at UCLA. And I think this is a big year where he's got to make a step forward over there in the Pac-12. Sunshine Designs thinks Fitz is sitting comfortably. Royalty. They will be your surprise team. Might keep my receipts on that one. We'll come back to that. Rutgers is an interesting one. Kirk Shiraka, their new offensive coordinator, coming over from Minnesota. I think Kirk Shiraka was blessed with a lot of great talent in 2019, and that got him up to other jobs, Penn State, to be specific, and then it just didn't work out. I think having the Rashad Bateman, the Tyler Johnson combination, and Tanner Morgan and everybody working together on offense that year, I think it made Kirk Shiraka look really good. I'm curious to see what he can do with Rutgers because they haven't had a lot of weapons at the skill positions as of late. Yeah, it's not likely. I'd say right now that Rutgers beats Maryland, but that's what they would have to do to get to a bowl game, to get to 6-6. And right now, that's got to be the goal for Rutgers. You've gotten to those 5-7 marks. You've gotten to that that mark where you're really close. When we talk about the schedule, I think a big reason why we haven't seen out of is, will we get more teams? Will we get an Oregon and a Washington? Talked about that before earlier in the show. Yeah, should be interesting to see when we will get the schedule out for 2024. Matt Reeves, you're going to get your wish on Friday. Got a video coming out titled, topicked. It will be, if the Big Ten expands to the Southeast, will they overtake the SEC on the field? Florida State, Miami, Georgia Tech, North Carolina. It's funny. We've been talked about expansion at the top of the show, a little bit in the middle, and now towards the end. One school has not been mentioned. Notre Dame. That's very interesting. Everybody's perspective on all of this. Where is Notre Dame going to go if they don't go to the Big Ten as these things kind of continue to shrink? As they continue to shrink down, do they go the situation where they join the Big East for basketball and every other sport and continue to be independent in football? These conferences get bigger and bigger and bigger. There's going to be less opportunities for Notre Dame to stay independent. Boy, Tony, you're really testing my mind here. Who is the best quarterback to play at Rutgers since they joined the Big Ten? I don't know if I want to go down that road. I don't know if I want to go down that road for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. In theory, it's supposed to be Gavin Wimsatt. In theory, 4-star recruit. Things really picking up, that he's supposed to be the guy, but it just hasn't happened. It hasn't happened for whatever reason for Rutgers since they've been here. Those Chris Ash teams, when they first got to the Big Ten, were pretty bad. So I could go down there and I could do a deep dive. I'm not sure if I want to climb into that rabbit hole right now. Greg chiming in. Is this the year in which all the chips fall in line and Minnesota finally crawls their way up to mediocrity? You guys are funny. Up to mediocrity, meaning the Big Ten West title, apparently. I've said it before. I think the schedule is a little bit too tough for Minnesota. They've lost a little bit too much on defense. I don't, PJ Fleck, has he hit his ceiling at Minnesota? Did he hit his ceiling that early with that great 2019 season? Is this a 6-8 win team at Minnesota? I think that's a question that needs to be asked. Notre Dame stubborn, according to Eric. I wonder if they're going to get into a position where it's too late, where the Big Ten gets to 20, 22, 24 teams, who knows? And then they look around and says, well, I don't know if we got any more room for you. Now it's Notre Dame. Of course, there's going to be value there when they expand, but it should be fairly interesting to see that. So, yeah, a lot of people around Big Ten circles, Big Ten countries say, let Notre Dame, let them do what they do. Let them die. Let them beg for mercy. A lot of people think that when it comes to Notre Dame. Erica thinking PJ has hit his ceiling. I mean, it's not bad. 8 wins a year for the Minnesota. Like, if we really look back at history, that's pretty good. People in the Twin Cities media might not think that, but it is. But after they won 11 games in 2019, people are going to want to get back to that. Tony, we're going to have to get back. I'm going to have to get back to you on that. When's the last time the Gophers beat Ohio State and then Michigan in the same season? It would not surprise me to see never. That would not surprise me to see that has never happened. But yeah, that's. I got to get stats and info on that. as if I had a stats and info. On that, it's been at some point you got to, I don't want to say you should settle and accept who you are as a program, but man, it's just like at some point, you got to know who you are, especially with the USC and UCLA coming into the conference. You got to have a certain set of expectations, I believe, at some point. Matt Reeves chiming in. Notre Dame will only be forced to join if the NBC contract renewal is less than they would like. They'll see if another network wants them, but I don't think there's enough money right now. Here's the deal with Notre Dame. I don't think they've ever been motivated by money. I think, they've made less some years with this NBC contract just being 1 6-game contract. I think they just, for some reason, love sitting in independence. They love thinking that they're better than everybody. They love sitting in that position. Really. And for the most part, it hasn't, we'll see where they're at money-wise. Will financials be a priority for them down the road? Or if these teams continue to have 9 conference games and they still got non-conference slots, is Notre Dame still going to be able to fit in when the playoff expands, right? They'll never be in the buys, right? They'll always have, because the top 4 conference champions get buys. Top 4. They'll never be in that position. Now they maybe got to go on the road in the first round of that 12-team playoff. Have fun. Have fun with that. Have fun with that. Have fun. Yeah, I know what Notre Dame brings. I'm just not optimistic. I've heard what their athletic director has said recently, and I hold no optimism that they are going to get a deal done, that they're going to work. I mean, they still got to deal with the ACC. There's still a chance that the ACC could survive as well. So there are so many different aspects of this. And, the TV contract mentions Notre Dame by name. And we know Notre Dame and what they bring. We know the fan base. We know the attention they bring. They're the team we love to hate. We understand that. But at the end of the day, you got to, you're not going to bend over backwards to get Notre Dame. Notre Dame seems like the team that would scoff at playing on the Big Ten Network. We'll see what they say when Big Ten Saturday night outdraws a lot of their games on NBC. We'll see what happens then. So it'll be very interesting to see how this continues to progress down the road for the Irish. They've been wanting to maintain their independence for a very, very, very long time. And now, what's it going to be? What's it going to be now? Did it go too far down the line? A lot of times in conference realignment, it's acting proactively, being ahead of the trends. Notre Dame behind the trends. Notre Dame behind. Very curious. There's been rumors about NBC and getting in on an NBA contract. What's going to happen if at the last second, we signed a deal with the NBA and we like our Big Ten deal, and now the deal with you, Notre Dame, it just doesn't, maybe it just doesn't pack a punch. Now, instead of playing Power 5 teams all the time, you're playing Nevada, you're playing Toledo, you're playing Marshall. Half of the games aren't against Power 5 teams like they used to be. It's something that could happen. I've made videos on this. Go check them out on the channel as it pertains to Notre Dame. I mean, they're right there. Rivals, USC, Purdue, Michigan, Michigan State. We've been saying this for decades. To deaf ears, apparently. Very good comments tonight, everybody. Appreciate everybody for being on the live stream tonight. I think this will do it for the evening. Very much appreciate everybody for coming on board. Remember, every Wednesday night, 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central. That's where it is. Big Ten TED Live here every Wednesday night. So until then, we've got videos coming up on the channel this week. Tomorrow, we've got Wisconsin. Are they overhyped? Are they overrated? On Friday, if the Big Ten expands to the Southeast, will they overtake the SEC on the field? Until then, I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next one and next Wednesday.